The name's Sunny. Always Sunny. Yeah, okay, you know this thing. Welcome to It's Always Sunny in Hollywood. I'm your host, Red Drum Arts, and you're not?
I'm uh I'm Lugia Hillary, but call me Hilly.
You can go by Q. Q is Elias, because he's he gives us like
Because it's a
the
question
fancy
if he'll show
ways.
up again.
I'm the
Yeah,
guy
fancy
climbing up the
ways.
side of the mountain, also known as
Oh, you're
Patrick.
Moneypenny. I'm kidding, I'm kidding.
Okay, yeah, let's go with that. Money penny.
You're M.
I don't know. I didn't have anything witty.
Well, anyway, in recent news, let's go to the obituaries. Orenthal James Simpson, colloquially known as O.J. Simpson, passed away today at 76 years old. He died with his family by his side, as is the family tradition. I'm sorry, that was a good joke. Yes, unfortunately, OJ died before he was able to find the killer. How familiar are you guys with the OJ trials?
Not too much. All I know is that there was a workout tape that was used as evidence.
All I know is gloves.
Yes, if the glove does not fit, you must acquit. The first time I heard that line was when I was watching Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer, the children's adaptation of the Christmas Carol. In deaths that deserve sincere mourning, Eleanor Coppola passed away. We've talked about her before on the show as she directed Hearts of Darkness, the documentary depicting her husband's slow descent into insanity, directing debatably the greatest film of all time. I guess she is the adage of behind every great man, there's a great woman. On to the next story. Shrek 2 has re-released, earning more money as opening week than Turning Red, Luca, and Soul made in their entire theatrical run.
I mean,
A lot of re-releases have been happening,
it's
mostly
Shrek
due to
2.
the writer's strike. What'd you say?
It's Shrek 2. I mean, of course it's gonna outsell almost everything else at the time. What's the general consensus? Do people like Shrek 1 more than Shrek 2 or vice versa?
I think people like Shrek 2 more than Shrek 1.
Shrek 2 more? Okay. Because I've seen the first movie a bajillion times. I haven't seen 2 as much though, but I remember liking it equally. But
I wonder what the long.
Why Shrek
Oh,
2?
sorry.
Did they not re-release the
Because
first
it's
movie
the
in
20th
theaters?
anniversary. It's the 20th anniversary
Oh,
of
okay,
Shrek
that
2.
makes sense.
One thing I've been wondering is what do you think the long-term effects of these re-releases are going to be? Because there's been quite a few, and most people have theorized that it's due to the effects of the writers' strike and pandemic kind of finally hitting as films that would have been released now were likely affected production-wise by the writers' strike. So instead of releasing new films, they're releasing old ones again. It seems to be successful. It seems to be keeping the studios afloat, and it seems to be training audiences back to going to theaters. But I also think it's kind of interesting how this kind of I wonder how like seeing old films again will kind of train audiences. I wonder if second run theaters are gonna have a sustainability, or if this may impact the success of new things moving forward. You know, a lot of people tend to say that stuff back then aged poorly, but clearly people are not bothered by anything that may have aged poorly in plenty of these films. So, I wonder if that may also affect how things move forward, as
Do
things
you
that
see
Hollywood
it?
thought was true.
Do you see it as a positive
Mm.
for movie theaters?
It depends.
Because I
I'm not
think
complaining now because I'm sure think it's probably a great opportunity that lots of people who did not get to see these films in theaters because they were born either after it was released are getting a chance. I know when I was a child, when they've re-released a few films that I'm very glad to see in theaters. I know I've mentioned this before, but I've seen several Ghibli films in theaters. I saw Pirates of the Caribbean, the first one in theaters when I hadn't seen the original in theaters growing up. I saw Jurassic Park when that was re-released, so I very much encourage re-releases.
we saw Jaws in the Room in theaters too, and I think there was a much different
You-
vibe that we got from watching those than just watching them on like a monitor or a phone. Well, the room for different reasons, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. So I fully encourage this. I just I do wonder, I feel like a lot of people predicted that there's going to be an industry crash in many industries, including like games and whatnot. And I do wonder what this means because pretty consistently for the 20th century, there was almost an unprecedented amount of like art being made, which wasn't really common in decades prior, where like people they would very much rely on the same handful of stories and just say them over and over again. When I guess for the past few generations, people have been much more trained to constantly have something new. Not that they didn't still care about older stuff, but there was always something new. And I wonder if this is gonna kind of retrain audiences to maybe appreciate older stuff. I don't know. Let's see what
Going back
else.
going back to re-releases for a second, what's a movie you would like to see like re-released on the big screen?
See, I have an answer, but I also part of me thinks that like what, like you made enough money off this movie. You've re-released this movie enough times, but at the same time, if I'm gonna see Gone with the Wind, I guess I want to see it on the big screen.
I think I'd want to see Scott Pilgrim on the big screen just to further appreciate all the special effects that they put in that.
Yeah, might as well put. I'd say The Thing. Just really any cult classic probably would work, just because those were films that were not appreciated until after they're on the big screen. So I would be interested in seeing like Evil Dead on the big screen.
Evil Dead 2, fuck yeah.
Ravenous. They'll never do Ravenous, but
You never
uh,
know. Some psycho probably will in one theater.
yeah, maybe. I mean, but here's the thing: like small run like things always existed. Like New York and like lots of places, they always like re-release old stuff. Anniversaries always had like releases, like even before like a few years back, like so like re-releases always have. So I guess like when it comes to like wide re-releases, because the wide ones are interesting because you're gonna see them with like a lot with like a packed crowd. Like what would be something that I guess you'd want like other people to see on the big screen, and not just like film nerds, so like regular people see on the big screen, and also something you'd like to see in like a large theater. So I guess there's a lot of comedy movies, I guess, because I feel like a lot of comedy movies probably play like better. I remember
I would
years ago
actually
seeing
I have an answer to that. I would fucking love to see Airplane on the big screen with an audience.
yeah.
That would be like hysterical.
Yeah, and I'd like to see it with like an audience that wasn't like too familiar with it too, that'd be interesting. I remember Doug Walker like years ago in one of his editorials, he mentioned how like the theater experience is actually very important to comedies. He mentioned that like when he saw Borat in theaters, he thought it was one of the funniest films he ever saw in his life, and when he saw it at home, he still thought it was funny, but he wasn't like howling laughing like he was in the theaters, and that's just because the way theaters are, there's kind of a feedback loop with, other people laughing, so you laugh too vocally. When at home, you're kind of trained to not laugh vocally, psychologically.
That's fair. You also
So
probably
yeah,
don't want a noise complaint in your apartment.
I wasn't even thinking about that. I mean, I don't really laugh out loud at home, and well, like when I live with my parents, so like,
Ever seen a movie in a 4D theater?
Mm,
no.
No,
I saw Spy Kids 4D, but that was a bit different. They gave me
I
a
mean like
like
I mean like
when
a
no
4D
no
theater.
I need you to understand the Spy Kids
I- I've
4D
s- I've
theatrical
seen, I've
experience
I saw Spy Kids 4D when it came out.
in theaters. Yeah,
Yes.
so you remember when you
I
got the
remember the
ticket,
scratch and sniff card.
they
I
also
have
gave
that
you like a
scratch and sniff
card.
somewhere. I don't know where
They
though. But I
they
still
gave
have
us
it.
a okay. So Lugia, when you went to see Spy Kids 4D, when they gave you your ticket, they also gave you a card. It was like a scratch and sniff card, and like at certain points in the movie, like a number would flash on screen, and you have to scratch that number on your card and then sniff it.
The only one
why?
I remember is at one point the dog farts and it says scratch number 4.
I'm like, I ain't doing that.
Yeah, no.
I'm good.
When I think 4D, I think more motion, not smell.
I know what you're. I know.
Yeah,
I
no,
know. It's
that's
just
what I was getting to because I asked, "Have you seen a movie in a 4D theater?" And Red
I mean,
went to Spy Kids 4D, which
the
isn't
one
what
at
I
the
meant.
fucking Funplex. I went to that where they like squirt you with water,
No, but I mean
roller
like a
coaster.
full movie, like a full feature-length movie.
No, no. I think I saw Shrek 3D. That's it,
That's
and that
not
doesn't
what I.
count because that's an amusement park ride again. So yeah, no,
I saw Ready
no.
Player One in a movie theater, which was a very interesting experience.
I saw Ready Player One in 3D, but I was in like a really shitty seat at the side of the theater, so like my eyes just kind of hurt because the 3D wasn't quite right. Anyway, Shadow the Hedgehog has been announced to be playing Keanu Reeves. I got that backwards. Keanu Reeves has been announced to be playing Shadow the Hedgehog in
Like,
the upcoming Sonic the Hedgehog
Is this
3.
confirmed? It's not a rumor?
It has been confirmed. I saw it on the Discussing Film Twitter account, and Discussing Film is reliable. No, Hollywood Reporter just announced it. Yes, it will be releasing December 20th. They also released a clip of the film. It is the Space Colony Arc flashback. It features Shadow Matrix dodging the gun soldier's bullets, only to see Maria getting hit them in bullet time.
Hey, she was
I'm
too
fucking kidding.
slow.
Yes. Shadow, after remembering this, goes on a rampage, much like John Wick when his dog died. Last line of the film is the Point Break is the Point Break goodbye, and then right before Shadow dies, he's like, "Be excellent to each other," and then Sonic's like, "Sayonara, Shadow the Hedgehog."
Like at the end of Shadow's own game, like he throws away the picture and he says
It's
that.
like, "Be excellent to each other." Be. Oh, it'd be funny if like when he meets the fucking androids and like Sonic Heroes, it's like when Bill and Ted meet the androids in Bill and Ted 2. You guys see Bill and Ted 2? I don't know if you
No,
did.
I never saw the sequel.
Okay. Well, in Bill and Ted 2, Bill and Ted, they run into like evil robot clones of him. By the way, did Shadow, I don't remember if my memory of this is accurate, but did Shadow like steal the emeralds? Because like Sonic was accused of robbery, right? That was his crime. That's what he was a
And people
Shadow.
confused him as Shadow.
Okay. I think
Well,
when Shadow
vice versa,
robs
but you know what I mean.
I think when Shadow robs the bank, he should be wearing the fucking Nixon mask from Point Break. Or the Austin Powers mask from Baby Driver. And Austin Powers is a parody of James Bond. And I'm not done with talking about this story, so that transition won't work. Anyway, yeah, okay. I was making the bullet time thing I said earlier was a joke, but like unironically, Chaos Control like is bullet time, right? So like they actually might do that. Like I want to like take a bet. All right, like what do you think are the odds that they're gonna have a Matrix parody in the film
Uh,
at some point?
I'd say likely.
Probably.
And
But like, if not bullet time, then probably something else.
yeah, I'm gonna say like 60%. Technically, when whatchamacallit that fucking what's Eggman's grandpa's name again?
Gerald.
Gerald.
Gerald. Yeah, every that scene where like Gerald is like, about to get executed by the firing squad. This game's dark, honestly. What the fuck? But yeah, that scene where Gerald's getting executed by firing squad. He's like stanced up in the exact same stance that Morpheus is when like he's being held to ransom by the machines in the at the end of the Matrix. Shadow and Sonic team up to take out the space colony arc, just like Morpheus. No, I mean Neo and Trinity take out that building, or take out that fucking John Wick and the hotel in the Continental. Let's see. Oh, one more joke. They should change the truck at the end of City Escape to the bus from Speed. Okay, I actually just realized something. You guys remember the bar scene from the first Sonic movie?
Vaguely.
It's the one. It's basically a ripoff of the Quicksilver scene from X-Men. Everything's like slow and like Sonic.
I know what you're talking about.
Like everyone's frozen in place except for Sonic. Isn't that Chaos Control? Like,
Uh,
Or is that
how's
Sonic
Shadow
just
like?
being?
How's Shadow gonna be faster if like Sonic can just do that naturally?
Isn't that just Sonic being naturally fast to the point where everything's normal to him, but everyone else is
Yeah, I know,
slow?
but like how is Shadow gonna be faster than him with like the Chaos Control thing? Because the Chaos Control thing is like slowing down. So like, I guess he'll just make it teleportation. But like, I don't know. It's kind
I
of
don't know.
lame.
That's for the writers to find out.
I genuinely wonder if they're gonna go as dark. Cause like I genuinely think Sonic Adventure 2 is a very good story. I kind of wish like every day I hope like the guys who did the 2003 Astro Boy anime, if they adapted Sonic Adventure 2 into an anime, it'd be like one of the greatest anime ever, honestly, unironically.
What do you mean
So,
Sonic X was bad?
the Sonic X wasn't bad actually. The Japanese version wasn't bad. The 4 Kids dub apparently changed. the script significantly. So a lot of people actually vouch for the Sonic X thing, but I still think that I'd like it to be, more accurate, I guess, the Sonic Adventure thing. Especially because like when most people praise the Sonic X thing, like they're like, yeah, the first two seasons are okay, but they mostly prefer the third season, which is like a space opera. But again, I think Sonic X is fine, honestly. Sonic X, like the Japanese version, is a pretty fine representation of the Sonic franchise at that time. Even Chris, like I don't hate Chris, like whatever. That kind of had like a Digimon thing going on, but I want Astro Boy because I've been reading Astro Boy lately, and every time I'm reading it, like I already knew that it inspired Mega Man, but I'm like, this definitely 100% inspired Sonic. Like Pluto, the Pluto anime and the greatest robot on Earth, those are like objectively like that had to have influenced Sonic in some respect. Not Pluto, because Pluto came out after Adventure 2, but like the original one probably did. I read this one arc and like straight up, like it is so fucking similar to Gamma's arc in Sonic Adventure 1, and I'm like, yeah, they definitely took some inspiration. They had to have. No way they didn't. Watch the 2003 Astro Boy anime. Anyway, that's it for the news. Tune in next week where we will be talking about the news. I'm your host, Red Drum Arts, and you're not. Now, Bond. James Bond. Okay, so you guys have never seen a James Bond movie before, right? Like in full?
I have never seen one, period, until now.
I've seen No Time to Die in full and part of the 2006 Casino Royale. That's it.
Okay, that's kind of funny because the movie that I made you watch is very blatantly the main things that those two films drew from in terms of past Bond films. But all right. To give you a brief history of background for On Her Majesty's Secret Service is On Her Majesty's Secret Service is, I would argue, the most important Bond film because it was the first Bond film not made with Sean Connery, and it was also during the absolute height of Bond's popularity. And basically, this was sort of this and technically Roger Moore films, but this was sort of like the experiment to see if Bond could continue, and because of that, they really pulled out all the stops. This film was basically designed to either be the new beginning for Bond or be the end of the series, and they also wanted to be like this big thing to sort of prove that the series can be good without Connery. So they pulled out all the stops. For the director, they decided to get Peter R. Hunt. Okay, On Her Majesty's Secret Service is the first film that Peter R. Hunt directed. So you may be wondering, is like, why would he be a safe bet for the film? And that's because Peter R. Hunt is one of the only people that worked on every single Bond film prior. He was the editor for all 5 films, and for Goldfinger onward, he was the second unit director. So that means that he basically did some directing capacity for the most Bond of the Bond films. Because I've mentioned this before, but the first 2 Bond films were very clearly heavily drawn. They're very clearly inspired and took heavy influence from the Alfred Hitchcock spy thrillers of the time, such as North by Northwest. Goldfinger is when the Bond series really came into its own. So yeah, Goldfinger, Thunderball, You Only Live Twice, and On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Those are the 4 films that I think really like is what I consider kind of like the golden age of Bond. It's when Bond was the most popular franchise, and it's when Bond was the one that was defining the trends, not other movies defining the trends that Bond took inspiration from. Because there are many films at the time that people don't talk about that took inspiration from Bond. There was many parody films. There was Modesty Blaze. There was I think it's called Flick. I don't know if it's considered Flick, but yeah, there was a couple films similar to Bond that was coming out at the time. What's actually interesting about the Austin Power films is that the Austin Power films very clearly took inspiration from Bond, but they actually took inspiration from just a lot of 60s movies at the time that were also, drawing from Bond, which I always thought was funny. Some of those are parody films. A lot of people don't know this, but the first adaptation of Casino Royale to film was a parody movie because rights were kind of weird back then. I think Goldfinger is when the James Bond series really came into its own. But their undisputed masterpiece is On Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Well, What's the general
Their most
consensus
accomplished album.
when it comes to the James Bond movies? Like, what's considered like the pinnacle?
Okay, so what's considered the pinnacle from the Connery era is Goldfinger. Without a doubt, Goldfinger is kind of considered the quintessential Bond film. It's the one that defined the series. Honor Majesty's Secret Service in recent years has severely increased its reputation. It's Honor Majesty's Secret Service is now considered one of, if not the greatest Bond film, which is one of the reasons I wanted to talk about it because I agree. I also think it's one of the greatest, if not the greatest Bond film. And it being the only one with this actor, and it kind of being at the height of Bond's popularity, kind of feels like the perfect kind of film to talk about it. So yeah, it's either going to be Honor Majesty's Secret Service or Goldfinger. These are going to be the two Bond films I was going to recommend. In terms of post '60s Bond, The Spy Who Loved Me is kind of considered Roger Moore's kind of best one. Although pretty much all the Moore films have like their fans. He's probably the most controversial Bond, as in his films are considered more of a mixed bag. But The Spy Who Loved Me is considered his best. Both the Timothy Dalton films are highly regarded. The Living Daylights is more of a traditional Bond film than License to Kill, though. GoldenEye and Casino Royale, respectively, are considered to be sort of the next kind of quintessential Bond films after Goldfinger. So I guess if you asked most Bond fans what their top five would be, it'd be Goldfinger, Honor Majesty's Secret Service, The Spy Who Loved Me, GoldenEye, and Casino Royale. So luckily, every Bond basically got one film that everyone kind of agrees is one of the greats. So lucky for them. We haven't had a Bond so far that's had a movie that people consider that like hasn't had at least one film that people consider one of the best. In terms of consistency, well, I mean, obviously, like Lazenby and Dalton are considered the most consistent Bonds, but that's because they have like the least amount. Connery is probably considered the most consistent, just because the first 5 films of him are just considered good, and the other 2 films he made after were made when there were other Bonds, and like it was really like a very weird kind of situation. Like a lot of people don't really think one of them even counts as a Bond film because it wasn't made by the Bond production company, but it was again one of those stupid rights issues things. Connery's probably the most consistent Bond. Moore's considered pretty consistent too, because while no one like highly regards any of his films, they also consider his movies like to all at least be consistently entertaining. Brosnan's considered a mixed bag, just like Moore. I would argue that of his 4 films, 3 of them are good, but some people are harsher towards them than me. Craig is okay. They're all a mixed bag, quite frankly. Craig is probably the most mixed baggy because with Roger Moore, everyone's like all the movies have good stuff, all the movies have bad stuff. With Pierce Brosnan, they're like each one gets like kind of worse. With Pierce Brosnan, it's just like the first movie's good, the second movie is a little bit less good, the third movie is like the good stuff is like some of the best, but the bad stuff is like really bad, and then Die Another Day is like the first half is good, the second half is terrible. Craig is like the only one where it's like a mixed bag, but in terms of like full movies, as in like people like Casino Royale as a whole, people like Skyfall as a whole, people hate Quantum of Solace as a whole, people hate Spectre as a whole. No Time to Die is the only one where people are like think it's a mixed bag, and even then, the people who like No Time to Die, they like it overall, and the people that don't like it don't like it overall. So Craig is more of a weirder Bond. That's the broad background on the Bond franchise. Those are the recommendations. As for this film specifically, Honor Majesty's Secret Service is considered one of the most popular Bond books. In fact, it was so popular, it was originally going to be adapted after Goldfinger, but it was postponed because of the rights disputes with Thunderball. Honor Majesty's Secret Service was going to be after Thunderball, but then that got postponed again because when they were location scouting, I guess there was something wrong with the winter stuff because it was very snow heavy. So they decided that to keep on schedule, they'll just adapt You Only Live Twice instead, which is really funny to me. They adopted to just write a new screenplay instead of waiting for the weather to get cold. But that's old Hollywood was a funny thing.
Somehow that was more cost effective.
I mean, here's the thing: the books were already written, so like I guess writing a screenplay for like books is it's a lot easier. You just need to like find a book that because here's the thing: the Bond movies were not adapted in order at all. Like clearly they weren't adapted in order. But, like Doctor No is like the sixth fucking Bond book, and that's the first Bond film. So the Bond series and like they're episodic, so they basically just like pick whatever random book like works for whatever they need to stay on schedule. But yeah.
Right, because I was gonna ask, if I needed to watch any of the other movies like beforehand, if like this is supposed to be a continuation of another movie's plot.
No, none of the Bond movies are continuations. There are callbacks. I'm sure in this film you noticed the scene where Bond was going through his desk and looking at items.
Yeah.
So obviously you could tell he was reminiscing about past missions. And that perfectly works on its own. You don't need to understand what's going on. But all the things he's looking at are like the direct references to the previous 5 Connery films. They mostly just put in that scene though, just so the audiences know that this is the same Bond as the Connery movies. It's not like a reboot. It's not a different
It's not
guy.
an alternate universe or anything.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And Honor Majesty's Secret Service is ironically one of the most referenced Bond films ever because obviously once in a while the ending of this film is gonna get fucking mentioned because that's the most significant event of Bond's life.
We'll get there.
This changed with the Craig movies though, as the Craig movies were essentially a hard reboot of the franchise. So the Craig films are its own kind of self-contained things, and there is continuity between the Craig films.
Okay.
With the exception of Skyfall. Skyfall was meant to be a standalone, but then they retroactively made it not a standalone with Spectre. They did not plan those movies out. But No Time to Die is a direct follow-up of Spectre. Quantum of Solace is a direct follow-up of Casino Royale. Skyfall is its own thing. I don't know what the fuck's going on there. And they reference all of the previous ones in like Spectre, so like technically all 5 films are connected. But with all the pre-Craig films, watch in any fucking order. I watch them in any fucking order. I didn't see this shit in order. You think I saw this in order? Not. I mean, I saw Doctor No like first. That was the first Bond film I saw, but like that was it. Everything else I just watched randomly. I haven't seen most of the more films. I saw GoldenEye, then I saw the third Brosnan film, then I saw the second Brosnan film. Life's crazy. Anyway, Connery resigned at the beginning of filming of You Only Live Twice, and Saltzman was planning on adapting The Man with the Golden Gun. They still weren't going to adapt Honor Majesty's Secret Service, even though it was planned many films ago. And what's really funny is that The Man with the Golden Gun, they were going to film that, and they were planning for Roger Moore as the next Bond. But because there is political instability in Cambodia, which is where they were going to film The Man with the Golden Gun, they decided to not adapt The Man with the Golden Gun. Instead, they were just like, fuck it, let's just do Honor Majesty's Secret Service.
All right, let's just rip the Band-Aid right off. Come on, let's go to the Alps.
I have no idea why, though, they didn't stick with Roger Moore, and then, like, after Honor Majesty's Secret Service decided to go back to Roger Moore. Again, these movies have baffling production histories. And I'm pretty sure the only reason that, like, stuff is kind of coherent is just the fact that it's the same, like, up until, like, recently, it was the same group of people working on the films. Because, like, obviously you had the director, Peter Hunt, working on all the previous 5 films. But even the, like, of those, like, 5 films, you had, like, 3 of them were directed by the same guy. The ones who directed the other 2, they went on to direct most of, like, the Roger Moore films. The first few Roger Moore films, and then, like, the next 5 Roger Moore films were directed by the guy who edited all the movies after Peter Hunt stopped editing the movies. Yeah, Bond was like pretty much helmed by the same handful of people. Peter Hunt, who directed the 5 preceding films, had impressed the producers enough to earn his directorial debut, as they believe his quit cutting had set the style for the series. It felt that Peter Hunt was the guy who was the real kind of one of the main defining voices of the franchise, so they're like, if we're going to get a director, might as well be this guy. Also, Lewis Gilbert, who directed, again, 3 of the past 5 Bond films, declined. So, what's funny, and this will be interesting to you, Patrick, is Hunt, before working on it, was working on Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
Hey.
In fact, he asked for the job while working on Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. And the editor for On Her Majesty's Secret Service was someone that he met on the set of Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. Chitty Chitty Bang Bang was written by Ian Fleming. The writer of James Bond.
I mean, we went over this when we talked about Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
I know, but it's just so funny that like it's really weird how many connections this movie had to Bond. Like a bunch of people that worked for Bond for the Bond movies
Yeah.
were also the ones that were working on the Chitty Chitty Bang Bang
Is
movie.
there
I
a
told
flying
you,
train
Chitty
in one of the
Chitty-
Bond movies?
I told you, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang is what happens when the people behind James Bond try to make Mary Poppins.
Yeah, but like when you said that, I thought you meant like yeah, like it was the writer that was like the James Bond. When looking through this, I found out it wasn't just the writer. It was like
It was much
everyone.
deeper.
It was fucking everyone. So yeah, Hunt was focused on making his mark. He wanted to direct. He wanted this Bond film to be like different than any other Bond film. He wanted to be his movie and not anyone else's. And I personally think he succeeded. I think in terms of style, this is Bond at a stylistic peak. And there's a bunch of like interesting editing techniques that I'm sure you guys noticed. Anyway, the screenwriter was the same screenwriter as the previous as 4 of the past 5 Bond films. They decided to focus less on the sci-fi gadgets and focus more on the plot, like they did in From Russia with Love. So it kind of led to this being a bit more of a grounded Bond film, but with like obviously the style had evolved so much more since the first 2, which were grounded. So it kind of felt like it was able to capture the sensibilities of the first few Bond films and the later Bond films at the same time, which is again another reason why I think it's kind of a stylistic peak. The script followed the novel much more closely than the previous film adaptations. This does lead to some continuity errors because You Only Live Twice, which came out before this film, the book takes place after. So what's really funny is that it actually makes more sense to watch this movie first, even though it very clearly is meant to be. Okay, so like
So like there's a James Bond book timeline, and then there's a completely separate James Bond movie timeline that just does its own order.
yes and no. Okay, so here's the thing. Let me just explain it. You're not supposed to view these movies as like having real continuity, basically. Because if you do, it doesn't make sense exactly. The way the Connery movies works, there was a bit of continuity there where it was like they hinted at Blofeld in some of the earlier films, and then like Blofeld finally shows up and You Only Live Twice. The thing though is On Her Majesty's Secret Service, the book is the first appearance of Blofeld. Like it's the first time Bond and Blofeld meet face to face. So technically, it's a continuity error because they met in You Only Live Twice the movie, but this is their first meeting. They were planning on having like Bond go through like plastic surgery to disguise him from the enemy, and was also to like get the audience to accept the new actor. However, they just figured it'd be easier like to just say fuck it, like suspension of disbelief. They can just buy it. They're like, why not like why draw attention to that? Let's just like ignore it, and no one will care. And no one did care. So to make the audience not forget that it was the same James Bond and not a new Bond, they included many references and in jokes. This includes Bond breaking the fourth wall by saying, "This never happened to the other fellow." The credit sequences images from the previous Bond installments. Bond visits his office, and as I mentioned before, has finds objects from Dr. No, From Russia with Love, and Thunderball. And the caretaker is whistling the theme from Goldfinger. In terms of behind the scenes things, after the film came out, so a lot of people thought that maybe Lazenby wasn't the best fit for the script, but he was it was like a really good script and a really good directed. Like everyone seems to think that every element except Lazenby was kind of the peak of the series. I would contest it a little bit. I actually think Lazenby was good for this role because but I'll get into that later. Some interesting things with the casting is in the Bond films, the first 5, the Connery films, Connery was like the respected actor, and all the Bond girls were how do I put this? They were models, they were supermodels, they were eye candy. For this film, ironically, the reverse happened, where the Bond girl was Diana Rigg, who was actually a very respected actress, and Lazenby was some model that nobody heard of. So it's kind of funny. And what's funny is that Diana Rigg was famous for playing Emma Peel in The Avengers, which is another British spy series. Peter Hunt admired Donald Pleasance's performance as Blofeld in You Only Live Twice, but they explicitly wanted to recast the character. It was originally they originally wanted Max von Sydow to play Blofeld. He did not. Although ironically, that that Bond film I mentioned that had Connery but wasn't actually made by the Bond people.
Yeah.
They got Max Sado to play Blofeld in that one, because of course all these movies have really weird connections. That's really it. The main way I can just explain the plot of this film is that like half of it is kind of a romance with James Bond and the Bond girl Tracy, and the other half is him sort of infiltrating Blofeld's kind of secret base. And yeah, that's really it. The plot doesn't really matter for these kind of movies. The most important thing about the plot is that throughout we slowly see him build this relationship with Bond. We slowly see him build this relationship with Blofeld, and it comes ahead to this like big epic climax. And at the end, Bond marries Tracy and is basically prepared to retire. And then Blofeld kills her, and the movie ends.
Yeah, that caught me off guard like so hard. That was like such a big 180. Because you would think,
Yeah,
because you thought, what's his name? I forget his name. People just call him the Count. You think that he dies after that bobsled scene because he's like hanging from a branch. So like
Branched
you
off.
think he's dead, but no, he's still alive and well, and he gets the last laugh as he and Furlang just shoot at Tracy and like get away with it.
I mentioned before the direction and like the story, all of that is why people love it. Um, the ending though is what really makes people consider this to be like the greatest Bond film, because it's the first one that actually has him go through an arc, and it has a just a fucking tragic ending. It is fucking heartbreaking,
Was Bond a static
right? Like,
character in the other ones beforehand?
yes, he's a complete static character. This was the first one where you actually see Bond's vulnerability. He actually develops an actual relationship with the Bond girl, and then it all gets ripped away. And that's what people find so compelling about it, especially because part of it's almost like it's almost a meta commentary almost, because like Batman can never be happy, Batman can never settle down, Batman can never end crime, because there always needs to be more Batman. So Bond can never be happy. So this was basically like the movie that almost challenged him. It was the movie where like you actually get to see what's under, and then it kind of almost explains why he's so cold in the later films. In fact, they actively do use this to explain why he's so cold in the other films. I mentioned it before that they reference Tracy in the later Bond films. You Only Live Twice was considered to be sort of the darkest Bond film, like when it was made. Yeah, they directly reference in the Dalton films that he used to be married, and then some fucked shit happened. This is basically the first time where Bond really became a character, and the Bond girl became a character. What I really like about the ending too is just like how it's executed, because it's so jarring, it's so sudden. This is why I disagree with people that George Lazenby isn't a good Bond, because this is the first Bond where you actually need to see him vulnerable, him being baby faced and all that stuff, him being like he's actually able to portray the kind of like a genuine kind of romance, and like the last scene I think sells it, because like Jesus fucking Christ, like you can tell
He
that
just
he's
had
dead
his heart
inside.
ripped in
You can
two.
tell that he's just completely dead inside. He's barely holding it together. But he's just keeping up the front because he has to for the situation he's in. She's like, when he's like, "Oh, she's just sleeping," I was like, "Oh my fucking god, dude!" Like, oh, that is heartbreaking. And then the fucking theme shows up and is like, James Bond will return. And it's like the most like it's like an ironic, like almost like twisting of the knife. It's like, oh, like it really makes you like, this is why like Bond couldn't get the happy ending, because we need to make more of these fucking movies. And I was like, shit, man, like that. Imagine this movie like bombed and like they didn't stop making Bond films after this. This would be so fucked up. This would be like the boldest fucking ending of any film franchise
He's
ever
just
made.
left
Like, Jesus
unhappy
Christ.
with no future.
And that's the thing. That's why I think like this is bolder than Casino Royale, because Casino Royale had the same thing where his wife died. But here's the thing with Casino Royale. In Casino Royale, it was different, because in Casino Royale, like she died because like she betrayed him, and like it was like more of a dramatic thing. It shows Bond getting like all cold and stuff. But this is like different, because this was like one, that's Bond's origin story. So it's like showing why he became dark. This isn't his origin story. This is just like a moment in his life. She's happy. She didn't betray him. It's like a genuine happy like thing. It's I honestly think that in its simplicity, there's honestly something like much more like kind of emotionally profound than with the soap opera thing in Casino Royale. Not that I don't like Casino Royale, but like I honestly find this more compelling. It's kind of like it reminds me of you guys remember Umbrellas of Cherbourg?
Yeah.
It reminds me of like that ending where like it's just like that one moment and like it's very simple, but like there's just so much to like it's such like a pure like human kind of like emotion thing that you're just like fuck dude. That's what I really like about like some old movies. We talked about Mary Poppins before. You know what I like about Mary Poppins is that you know that 90% of the movie is just like fun little antics, but then you got that one scene of him walking, and you know he sees like the you know the bird lady, the birds, and like all that shit is like it's just so kind of like emotionally profound. It's like because of like how jarring it is, and that's what I kind of like about older films and this one so much. So yeah, I don't know. You guys have anything to say about the ending?
I haven't heard from Patrick yet.
What Lugia said about the ending? Yeah, that again.
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
it was just like a
um,
very surprising twist that like we didn't even see coming, and that was like such an effective stinger for the ending. Like that shit just sticks with you.
I just want to know like how you feel because I feel like seeing that blind like like
Yeah, it was surprising.
yeah like like I'm just trying to imagine like people in the '60s like what the fuck did they think? They're just like haha you know Bond gets the girl again and just like immediately like, oh
I want
oh
my money back.
we actually did like perform significantly worse than the Connery films. It still made like a fuck ton of money. It made 82 million off a 7 million budget, which is like that's fucking high. So yeah, anyway, we talked about the ending. Let's talk about the beginning. What'd you think of the story? Like just overall.
Like you said before, there wasn't really too much of a story. It was more about the moment to moment action. That said, the beginning was very slow. And as someone who has never seen these movies before, I assume this is kind of a staple, just getting to know the characters and the locations that they go to before like the real action begins.
Yeah, I'll say a lot of the earlier Bond films have a bit more of a slow. Because here's another thing with like the Bond movies is well one you know obviously movies back then were a bit different like how they paced action films and stuff. They didn't have that kind of like part of the appeal of Bond was like the fantasy of tourism, like the locations and stuff. Like they didn't have the internet. They didn't like see stuff like this on TV. Like you go to the cinema to see all these like beautiful like places around the world. That was sort of like the appeal of Bond, like that you got to like indulge in this fantasy of getting to like travel and be this like dude who talks to hot women and shit. So as much as like, you know, people came for it for the exciting action, they came for it for that. So yeah. Um
Okay, because that's something that felt like was lost now.
Yeah, yeah. I would argue that every single Bond film I've ever seen, including the new ones, I think they're about like 20 minutes too long, each one. Or like maybe not 20, but like 20%. Like they always feel like they go on too long, every Bond film I've seen. So that's just kind of like a trait of the series, unfortunately. I will say they always seem to go too long in the exact same way. As in, like, No Time to Die is like generally a much longer film than the other Bond films, but it doesn't like when you're watching it, like it feels like it goes on too long, but it feels like it goes on too long, like the exact same amount as other Bond films don't go on too long. So like ironically, like when I watched that movie, I was like, this is like really well paced and also not well paced because it's paced exactly like the other Bond films are, but it's like an hour longer. So like I want to commend it, but at the same time, I don't. I think the strength of this film is the character interactions. I genuinely felt for Bond and Tracy's relationship. I thought the games that Bond and Blofeld plays was pretty compelling. I think this is like the best directed Bond film. Like one, the fucking colors. Like you guys, the fucking colors in this film, right? Like
I was more so engaged by the locations in the Alps. I'm a
I mean,
sucker.
yeah, the fucking locate
I'm
like
a
the
sucker for
locations, the
snowy
color.
areas and media. And like that looks like a place that I want to go and just ski down and have some fun,
It's a
except
ski
not get
resort in
fired
Switzerland
at.
at
It
Christmas time. Come on.
it's so fucking
That's a
beautiful.
great
And also,
location.
my God, that fucking shot with the helicopter by the window, I was like, holy shit. Like when I first saw that, I was like, I did not know that you could do that in the 60s. I was like, God damn, Jimmy. What the fuck?
And in that helicopter scene too, you see You see people skiing down, you see people using the bobsled, and those are
I
things
was
that
like,
James Bond does later on in the film. So that I thought that was pretty clever.
yeah, it is impressive like that to see a movie like from this time, and like it's especially impressive to me because like the other Bond films I don't think have like that same level of spectacle. But like when I was watching this, I was like genuinely awestruck, and the awestruckness was foreshadowing, which is like crazy.
Even the
So like
avalanche too.
yeah,
They mentioned an avalanche before, and it happens later on in the movie.
yeah, like I think that like this is honestly like one of the most well put together like Bond films. Again, I get why they thought this is like their best screenplay and like the best directed. And to talk about the direction, what I really like is like one, like obviously the action, like that's another thing. Like the early Bond films, like the action is like, eh. This one, I'm like, that fucking like that fucking ski shit. That was
Both the
fucking
ski
cool,
chase
man.
scenes were really good.
Those
The car
climaxes were
getaway
fucking
where they get
good.
into the race and they have to find a way to get out.
Yeah, like this actually had good action, and you know, I'll say, so this probably doesn't affect you guys as much because you haven't seen the earlier stuff, but like a lot of the fist fights in the earlier Bond films were kind of corny, except for From Russia with Love because it was in like a tight, confined space. This is the first one where I actually felt like that the fist fights had like some real oomph to them, and that's because, and I'm sure this probably bothered you, but it was they obviously did this thing with the editing where they would like cut out some frames so like the punch was like the impacts felt like snappier and whatnot. And I'm sure that's annoying to someone that's never seen a Bond film like before, but as someone who's seen the first five, I appreciated that. It made it much more engaging, the fight scenes.
Honestly, I didn't think much of the fist fights because of those cuts.
Yeah, I know, but like I just want to say like contextually, it's a huge improvement. Huge fucking improvement. Yeah, impressive action, impressive spectacle. Again, like there's even like in the non-action stuff, there were a lot of shots that I was like, God damn, how the fuck did they do that?
Why were there spikes near the elevator door?
Evil villain, it's a layer.
Why would you have that though? That's an OSHA violation just waiting to happen.
You think he cares
Uh,
about OSHA?
yeah, the only thing that supervillains care about is the IRS. What'd you say?
Speaking of, there are some gruesome fucking deaths in this movie. Like the guy, one of the guys gets hit by James Bond with a ski and he falls down like thousands of feet, which kind of reminded me of Better Off Dead, except if there was actual mortality. And the one guy who also got grinded by a snowblower and you see blood like coming out of it. Like
I
good
thought this was
lord.
James Bond, not Fargo.
I always thought it was kind of weird how James Bond is like a PG series because like he fucks a lot and there's a lot of violence and I'm like
He
it's kind of
fucks a
weird
lot
that
and
this
he
is like
fucks a lot of people up.
what's kind of interesting about this film is that James Bond is like the ultimate fantasy. You get like all you get to see like a bunch of like beautiful locations, beautiful women. You get to be the badass that gets all these girls and like also beats up these people. You save the day. And this is the first movie that's like, all right, but what if he was an actual person and then we ruined his life? I'm like, yeah, that's kind of like the fun thing about this because like it again, like I think this is the greatest Bond film because it indulges in the Bond fantasy the most and it also rips it apart at the same time. You know, Bond meets a lot of beautiful women in this movie, and he sleeps with them. At the same time, you're also like, oh, this is awesome, but also, man, I hope you get with Tracy, cause like she's so nice. I like she's such a cool person. I like her as a person. You know that kind of shit. And so you know, it's the rare movie that's able to have its cake and eat it too. One thing I want to praise about the direction, because I already like mentioned how I kind of like the editing and like how the action scenes are good. One thing I like about this is I think all the conversation scenes are actually like pretty well directed, which is like not something I think most people notice, but like
The way that Draco like puts on his glasses when he looks at the calendar and then the camera rack focuses to the calendar as he puts them on, I thought that was a nice touch.
yeah, there's like a lot of like little details there. Like this movie is very well blocked.
Really like the scene
Like there's a
where
lot of
where Bond enters the office and he throws the hat onto the coat rack.
How many takes do you think that took?
what's really
Oh,
funny is
not too many. I don't think it's too hard, but I don't know. I just liked it.
okay, actually what's funny is that's kind of a Bond staple.
Really.
In the Connery movies he did that too. I remember like the first Connery movie I saw, he like did that. It was like, "I'm now for my next trick, Miss Moneypenny." And then Moneypenny was like, Q needs to talk to you. He was like, "Oh fuck, not Q, M." He was like, "My next Miss."
We're a
Yeah.
few letters off, but you got the spirit.
Moneypenny and Bond flirt a lot in the movies. That's also kind of like the gag with At the Wedding, where Moneypenny is like, damn, because like they flirt so much that part of you always think that like if Bond's gonna get with someone, it's probably gonna be her. But like, so that's kind of like the gag with Moneypenny at the end being like, oh, it's sad to see him go, because like they kind of have a weird relationship. But anyway, there's a lot of conversation scenes in this, and I
especially in the
really
beginning.
like them. The thing is I kind of like them, at least compared to like other films, because when talking about the direction, I think it's really well blocked because there's a lot of movement in the frame, either with the actors moving or there's a lot of movement in the background. Like there'll be like some shots where, like they'll be talking, but because like you'll see stuff happening in the background and like it's a bit more engaging. And like I think that's again like some details I appreciate because a lot of films don't put in those details. Kurosawa does it, but how many people are putting in Kurosawa effort? The still bits are also like framed pretty uniquely. Not standard shot reverse shot composition. They also like shift the framing depending on the mood of the conversation, which I think is pretty good. I think I generally think that you could probably watch this film on mute and you'd be able to understand the kind of vibe and dynamics going on in the scene just based off like how they frame everything, which I think is like a sign of a good film. So yeah, kind of feel like almost every aspect of the direction in this film is like really good. Like to the degree where I kind of want to see Peter Hunt's other films because like I'm generally like impressed. Like what else did he direct? Not that much. Shit, a couple Charles Bronson movies. Oh well. I like the set designs. I feel like it took advantage of the wider frame. A lot of strong compositions. I also really did the '60s aesthetic. So like obviously all those like kind of '60s look has really appealed to me.
Yeah, I thought some of the locations were cool, like the Count's like evil secret lair, and it was all like sci-fi and shit. Is that a Bond
I
staple
like how
too?
like yeah the layers are typically like not this grand usually, but like yeah this usually got it. The helicopter flying scenes are pretty cool. I'm kind of impressed how they got those shots. I really like the lighting. There's a lot of scenes where there's like really colorful lighting, like obviously the hypnotism scenes, but like they got like a nice warm glow to everything. There was some rear projection in the ski scene. Did that bother you guys?
Or what do
It
you
didn't
mean?
bother me, just okay. Okay, so you didn't even notice it, Lugia. That's interesting. Okay.
Oh,
I
you
just
mean
noticed
like
it because
the
earlier.
green screen? Yeah, no, that I saw more of that in the bobsled scene than the skiing scene.
Okay, yeah. It's done a lot better than the earlier Bond films. Have you guys ever seen Return of the Jedi? It kind of reminded me of like the speeder bike stuff in Return of the Jedi, where like it like you can tell, but like it's also like good, so you don't mind,
Here,
you know?
it's a sign of the time. Like maybe they couldn't get all the shots they wanted when they were actually like going down the mountain, so you got to make do with what you can.
Yeah. So again, like I think for its time, like it's very clearly a cut above all of its peers, and I think like even like on its own merits, it still holds up mostly pretty well. Like all the shortcomings, it's better than most stuff at the time, and all of its positives are like still positive to this day. I love this film on like a technical level, a story level. Again, performance wise, I thought it was really strong. I found Diana Rigg to be very charming, and I thought Lazenby actually did a good job. The villain Blofeld, super memorable. What do you guys think of his performance,
I thought he
or
was
the
all
performances
right.
in general?
There was one scene of him petting a cat, which I assume is also a Bond staple, but he was all right. I don't think he was like anything amazing, but
Actually, I think this was the one that originated the petting the cat one.
they didn't
Actually,
do it in the other 5 movies.
no, not really. I don't think so. Let me check. What was first Bond movie? Because one, Blofeld was only in one other film, so like petting the cat is like a Blofeld thing, and like since just Blofeld's the most popular Bond villain, every Bond movie parodies Blofeld, which is why they always have him petting the cat in all the parodies. Oh no, no, From Russia with Love had the cat. Okay, actually, in From Russia with Love, they show him petting the cat, but they don't show him. So like, you only live twice is like they reveal his face. So okay, yeah, the cat is a Bond
Was it like
staple.
a Dr. Claw thing where you just see his hand and the
Yeah,
cat? Okay.
yeah. I mean, Dr. Claw was like obviously drew inspiration from Bond there. So yeah. It's really weird. I've never seen Inspector Gadget, but I know like everything about it just because of cultural osmosis. Did you like the performances? I don't know if we really. What do you think of the performances? I guess.
Not knowing of any other actors' performances as Bond, like fully, I thought this Bond got the job done pretty well. He's got the right amount of charisma. He's serious when he needs to be, and it doesn't happen often. But when he gets sad, it fucking hurts to see him that way.
I also like how dry his humor is, because he has a lot of like kind of dry one-liners at times, which I was that was kind of funny. I mean, all the Bonds have it, but like his delivery here is like in particular kind of funny to me. Patrick, what did you think of the acting?
I thought it was all around pretty good. I wouldn't say there was a certain performance that stood out to me as anything amazing, but again, they all did pretty well. They got the job done. I thought what's the guy's name who plays Bond again?
Lazenby
Him. Yeah, him. I thought he did pretty well in the role. He
or
fit pretty
Lazenby,
much the
one of
arch
those two.
he fit pretty much the archetype of what I think of when I think James Bond, despite having very little experience with Bond.
Yeah, I'd say that the Lazenby is like when he's doing Bond, he's basically playing like kind of like the standard, kind of like the base level, and like the other Bonds are like more popular because they add like a little more extra to him. When I think the only thing Lazenby really adds is the kind of vulnerability, but even like then, I think Diana Rigg kind of carries those scenes a bit more, which is why I think he doesn't stand out as much.
And this is the
Because
only
I
one
think
with him.
yes, this is the only one with him. He was a kind of one and done. Again, this Bond film's kind of an anomaly, where it was like the most unique, but also the most like the most true to the series at the same time. It's kind of bizarre. I think I like the performances a bit more than you guys, just because I kind of liked the performance of Blofeld. Like I don't know the way his line delivery and like his look with like the earlobes, like it kind of stood out to me. Like the way he was like the way he talked was just like just like off enough where like it really stuck in my memory. And again, I thought Diana Rigg was very charming, which again you guys don't have much of a point of comparison. They're basically just sexy lamps in the other film. So like this one having more of an actual like connection, it obviously makes, her death feel all the worse. I feel like we neglected the most obvious thing about Bond that we need to talk about, the score. I want to hear from Lugia. Obviously, you probably heard like the Bond score before through like cultural osmosis, but
Yeah.
like seeing it in the film, like what'd you think?
Honestly, they do play one theme throughout most of the latter half of the movie during the action and chase scenes, but I thought it was so effective anyway, where it just
Yeah.
elevated those scenes. I can't say much for most of the other songs, unfortunately, but like that one song that they use for most of the action and chase scenes, I really liked.
Yeah, the main Bond theme, the one where it's like
Yeah, that I also really like the main song of All the Time in the World. Funny enough, that was in No Time to Die, the only other Bond movie I've seen. So
Yeah, I mean it is. Yeah,
you can even
that's
hear
another thing.
you can even hear instrumentation of it for certain dialogue scenes, which is nice.
That reminds me, what do you guys think of the opening title sequence with all the crazy visuals? What do you think of
With the
that?
silhouettes.
What do you think?
Do Aside from the barrel, do all the Bond openings try to be different from one another?
Yeah, so basically every Bond movie opens with the barrel, then there's an opening scene, and then there's a title sequence. Like the title sequence usually has like a bunch of crazy psychedelic imagery. Um,
But it's all different to reflect the movie.
yeah, and they also have like a different song. So like every Bond film has its own theme song, and they usually actually get like pretty major artists from the time to sing it. So like obviously, Skyfall had Adele, No Time to Die had Billie Eilish, Nancy Sinatra, Paul McCartney. They've all done Bond themes before. Madonna did a
And here
Bond
we got
theme.
Louis Armstrong.
I always thought that was kind of interesting how like that's such like an old Hollywood thing, and it became like a Bond staple oddly because like if you've seen any 60s movies, they all have like an interesting opening title sequence and like a song. Not always a song, but they always have some sort of interesting title sequence. And the only movies I've seen like past the 60s that really go as far as Bond did is Bond and the Pink Panther. The Pink Panther because everyone likes the fucking cartoons they're not gonna let you cut the opening Pink Panther cartoon. And Bond, just because I think like they specifically became known for like the music and the opening title sequence just because they did it like so much better than most people. And like they always did in like a specific way, so it just kind of became like known thing for the series, and they just like always kept it going. So even though it used to be kind of standard in Hollywood, now everyone just thinks it's a James Bond thing because it's the only movies that still do it, which I always thought was kind of funny. It's kind of like how like so many traits that people associate with like the Looney Tunes was just like a reference to like other old comedy acts at the time, but no one remembers those old comedy acts. They just remember Bugs Bunny. So everyone thinks it's a Looney Tunes thing. Patrick, how did this compare to the other Bond films you saw? You saw
His
Bond's wife die. You saw Bond's wife die, and you saw Bond die. Which one did you like more?
Well, I only saw like 30 minutes of Casino Royale, and I saw No Time to Die once in theaters 2 years ago. So
That's
they're
enough.
not exact.
That's enough
They're
to
not
judge.
exact. Maybe for you, not for me.
But on its own, what did you think?
Thought it was all right.
Do you guys think you'll watch other Bond movies
Most
in the
likely,
future?
yeah. I might see Goldfinger.
Yeah, obviously the five I mentioned are probably like the must watches. So I guess if I have any final questions for you guys, it would be, I guess, any scene from this film that like stood out to you besides the ending that you liked
Again,
in particular.
the ski chase scenes for me anyway.
Okay.
Well, one because
All right.
I like skiing, and two, I don't think I've ever really seen a movie have like a ski chase scene. Better Off Dead notwithstanding.
Excuse me. What about Hoodwinked?
I forgot about that. That's animation, all right. I'm talking live action.
Yeah, I was about to say Sonic the Hedgehog 2, but that's also. The one that's really funny is this ski scene is so famous that almost every other ski scene ever made like directly references it. Like have you seen Inception?
No.
Okay, well, Christopher Nolan is a big Bond fan, and the ski chase scene in that film is a direct reference to both the ski chase in this scene in this Bond film, and also the ski chase scene in The Spy Who Loved Me, which is the most popular Roger Moore film. By the way, that ski chase scene isn't as good as this one, but it also has like one of the greatest moments in Bond.
I
So I
doubt it
think it
has
balances out.
two.
It doesn't. It just has one. It's the opening scene. The opening scene of The Spy Who Loved Me is Bond just got finished fucking a woman. Then he got a call from his boss. It's like, Bond, you need to get back to work. And it's like, all right. Then he suits up in his ski thing, and then he goes skiing, and I think some people try shooting him or some shit, and then he skis off a cliff and then parachutes.
In terms of scenes that stood out to me, well, other than the ski chase scene that Lugia mentioned and the hat on the coat rack thing I mentioned a while ago, I don't know. That made me smile. Other than those two things, I really liked the car chase scene that goes into the Derby,
Yeah.
and even before that, I like when Bond is in the the cable car room and he's bouncing on the wire trying to figure out how to get out.
Yeah.
Kind of reminded me
Um.
of Frozen a little bit, but he
Yeah.
actually
Yeah. Yeah.
thought
Yeah.
of like putting on like some protection for his hands.
So I guess it's not as prominent here as it is in other films, but what I liked about this is I really like the tension scenes in Bond stuff. So again, some Bond films lean more into Hitchcock stuff than others, but I do like kind of the tension suspense stuff. So I don't know if you guys kind of like if this reminded you guys, but all the scenes with the hypnotism and when he's like kind of skulking around the base, did that remind you of Temple of Doom? Because when I saw this, I was like, this really reminds me of Temple of Doom when like Bond, when Indy is kind of skulking around the lair, and there's like some hypnotism stuff going on there too, and like the cameras and kind of the espionage. Like I thought that stuff was kind of cool too, and like kind of a non-action stuff. And like I again, I like the interactions between Bond and Tracy, like that scene where like she shows up in the skates and like it pans up to him, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cute. So those are kind of the non-action scenes that stood out to me.
Can't say it reminded me of Temple of Doom because I have not seen it. I've only seen the very first Indiana Jones film and the very last one.
I can't say I
You
was
guys
reminded
ever
of
realize that
Temple
we're
of
kind
Doom.
of weird?
Yeah,
Yeah.
very much.
I know that's kind of like random, I know, but like it. Now the thing about like it's really weird that like like I can't judge you for like not seeing like some of these films because I didn't see them until I was old too. And I just like realized like it's kind of weird that like I didn't see Star Wars until I was in high school. It's kind of weird that like we're huge film nerds, but we became film nerds because of like different movies than most people. Like that's
I mean, you
interesting to
come
me.
from where you come from.
Yeah, but like it's just kind of like weird that like everyone else like kind of grew up on like certain films and like we just missed them and got exposed to different movies. What business did I have in single digits watching Rear Window, watching Woody Allen movies, you know? You saw like a bunch of classic musicals and shit. Like I don't know, what were like some of your favorite movies when you were growing up?
Space Jam.
Is that an actual answer, Space Jam?
I did watch that movie a lot growing up. um,
When
I don't think
I
highly
was
of
gro-
it now, but back then I watched the fuck out of it.
Okay, this is probably gonna blow you guys. I've never seen Space Jam.
Really?
I've seen Back in Action many times. I've seen Back
Space
in Action
Jam,
with Patrick, in fact, but
I think I've only seen Space Jam in full once. I've seen like clips of it and like I've caught it on TV a few times, but
I've seen
I think in
clips,
terms of
yeah.
I think in terms of seeing it all the way, only once.
Lace up your Nikes and we're gonna get a Big Mac on the way. That's the only scene from Space Jam I remember.
But sorry, you were saying Patrick?
Yeah, go on.
The movies I watched a lot when I was a kid were Roger Rabbit, Airplane, The Cat in the Hat, The Rescuers, and Dumbo.
I think that's kind of interesting that like
Odd selection, I know.
Airplane is one of like your childhood films. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
like that's kind of like interesting. Like most kids, they watch like E.T. and we watched 70s raunchy comedy. Like my
E.T.
dad showed me
E.T. is
my
another movie I've only seen once.
I saw E.T. too. I liked it. I saw it as an adult. You know what I saw when I watched E.T.? I was like, that was pretty good. It ain't no Lilo and Stitch though. I feel bad for E.T. because like I saw it after I saw a bunch of movies inspired by E.T. and I kind of like those movies more. Like I like Lilo and Stitch more. I like the Iron Giant more. I don't like How to Train Your Dragon more. I do think E.T. is better than How to Train Your Dragon, so I'll give it that. Well, actually, here's the thing: all the scenes with the dragons and How to Train Your Dragon, I like more. Like I like the stuff with Hiccup and the dragon and How to Train Your Dragon more, but like all the family stuff is more interesting to me in ET. What childhood movies did you grow up with, Lugia? That are like probably like odd and
When I
not
said
other
Space
people.
Jam, I remember watching Thomas the Tank Engine and the Magical Railroad, I believe it was called, a couple times as a kid, and I couldn't
Hmm.
tell you much about it.
Thomas
That
the
was another childhood favorite of mine. Yeah, I couldn't tell you much
Thomas
either.
Thomas the Tank Engine is so weird because I actually like saw a clip recently and like one oddly dark, but two
Was it the tunnel sequence?
yeah, but also don't know what's weird to me about Thomas the Tank Engine on a lot of children's shows. When we think of children's programming, we always think of like, oh, it's hyperactive, key jingling stuff. But like Mr. Rogers, Thomas the Tank Engine, Sesame Street, those shows were all super slow. And like I honestly think that like if you show it to like a teenager nowadays, they'd probably be bored. But you show it to a 5-year-old, they're fucking engrossed. Children's shows have like the Ghibli essence more than stuff made for adults. And people consider that like like a mature thing about Ghibli films, and I'm like, oh, okay. That's the thing. I don't think kids get enough credit. I think you can show a kid something mature, and they will actually absorb it better than an adult would, but they're just never given the chance. Anyway, last question. You like this more or Rear Window more?
What's the
Uh,
correlation?
James Bond is heavily inspired by Hitchcock's, and I don't think you guys have seen North by Northwest, so that's the only Hitchcock movie I could think of
I
that I
don't
know
know
you
if
guys
that's
have
a
seen.
fair comparison.
No.
It's not, but I asked it anyway.
I plead the fifth. The
Yeah,
world will never know.
Oh no, man. Like,
yeah.
Rear Window. I mean, I thought the beginning of this movie was slow, but the ending was very effective anyway, so it kind of balances out.
Yeah, okay. Actually, one more thing. So this movie came out in 1969. The Great Silence came out in 1968, and The Godfather came out in 1972. Umbrellas of Cherbourg came out in 1964. I just want to put that into perspective. Like, I guess it's not that crazy that Umbrella's Great Silence and On Her Majesty's Secret Service came out to kind of direct a similar, but like in three fucking like New Hollywood started right around the time this movie came out. The Godfather came out 3 years after this, and it feels like they're generations apart in terms of direction. Like, I think this is a well-directed movie, but like, and part of what I praise about it is that it does have kind of like a new Hollywood cinematography. But even then, like, I'm still like, it's dated in many aspects. And then when I see The Godfather, I'm like, The Godfather has not aged at all. Yeah, anyway, that's our show for today. Why don't you tell us your recommendation, Lugia?
All right, so for next
I don't
week,
know why I said it that way.
I'm gonna leave it to a choice. So, do we want to talk about a returning director or someone I believe we haven't talked about before?
Is the guy we haven't
Um,
talked about before like a significant director, or is he just some random guy?
Significant.
I'm gonna vote new director.
New director?
Who's the old director? Can you
Edgar
just tell me
Wright.
who the directors are? Okay, Edgar Wright, and who's the new guy?
John Woo.
John Woo.
Okay. All right. So next week we are going to be talking about Face Off, starring John Travolta
Oh,
and Nicolas
interesting.
Cage.
In my head, I was like, is it gonna be Face Off or is it gonna be Hard Boiled? It's like it's gonna be one of those two.
What if it was
Oh
Mission
yeah,
Impossible 2?
that'd be fucking insane. Because I figure you wouldn't do that because like doing Mission Impossible right after James Bond, that'd be like a little.
That would be, yeah. I have never seen Face Off, but I'm very interested in taking a look at it. I've been recommended it by a few
Yeah, no,
friends.
you are going to like it. I guarantee it. Yeah. Is this the first John Woo movie you guys have seen?
I believe so.
Well, his other ones are Chinese, so yeah,
You
I
know,
figured.
I've never looking at his filmography. I've never seen a movie from him.
All right. Well, I need to. Okay. I will note that for the future. Interesting. Good to know. Good to know. Good to know. Okay, so since we selected Face Off, what was going to be the Edgar Wright movie?
Last Night in Soho.
Oh, I haven't seen that one. Okay, interesting. Okay, cool. Either one would have been interesting to talk about. Cool. All right, that's the show for today. My name is Cage, Nicolas Cage. Join us next week for Face Off.